As the international community continues to reel from philanthropy for social development and investment, unquote, as well as, quote, to increase the involvement and inputs from young members of our diaspora, second, third, and fourth generation in host countries across the globe, unquote. Here to deconstruct the policy are Ambassador Derek James, Tricia Mitchell Darius of the International Organization of Migration, PhD candidate Tesfa Peterson of Queen's University in Canada, who is also Grenadian, and Grenada's outgoing Foreign Affairs Minister, the Honorable Peter David. It's Sunday, September 27th, and we welcome you to another installment of the Bub Report. Pleasant good morning and happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to yet another installment of the Bub Report. I'm very excited to be hosting another installment, and we did get started late today, and I do apologize for that. Technology can sometimes fail us, but all of my guests are here and raring to go this morning. But I want to begin and welcome my first guest for the first segment, Dr. Stephen Fletcher of the Campus International consultant. Dr. Fletcher, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Kelon, and good morning to your other guests and listeners and viewers, wherever they are.
Yes, so Dr. Fletcher, one of the things that I was doing this month is to essentially examine China's increasing, what I consider to be the hegemony in the Caribbean region. As a scholar, as a researcher, what are your perceptions? There are some who are suggesting that folks who are following this issue are being alarmist. There is also a narrative that is emerging in some quarters that we are engaging in xenophobia for engaging with talking about China's influence. What do you think about their involvement?
Certainly, Kelon and listeners and viewers, before we proceed further, Kelon, if you may just allow me to add some credentials to this topic and myself.
Yeah.
Recall I was Grenada's former ambassador to the European Union for 4 years.
Yes.
The Honorable Peter David was my boss at the time as Minister of Foreign Affairs. And I was also Grenada's ambassador designate to the People's Republic of China, where I spent probably over 4 months. And I had the opportunity to do an exchange program at China's Foreign Affairs University. I see that to establish the fact that my discourse today is also influenced by and is informed by my paying attention to foreign affairs and things to do with China. With regard to the framing of the topic, Kelon, if I may say, I would not necessarily frame the issue and use hegemony within the region. And I will clear that up later on. It is probably the exertion of significant influence, but let us establish the context in which we practice foreign relations and diplomacy in our region and that of China. Let us be mindful of the fact that the Caribbean, like all other countries in the world, we crave investment for our national, economic, and social development. We have always been recipients of foreign aid and foreign assistance. And therefore, the two articles that we have highlighted here, which speaks of the islands becoming hotspots for Chinese investments.
From that Daily Mail that was published last week.
From the Daily Mail, yes.
Yes.
We must also understand that part of it is the construct of the Caribbean, that dependency on foreign investment. And over time, we have had Western investments. We continue to have that from the United States, Canada, Britain, and from international organizations. Similarly, it is now China. But what has happened, Kelon, that we need to, that I want to draw person's attention to, is that 2011 marked a fundamental change in the global balance of economic and aid power. Coming out of the global crisis of 2008 and thereupon, Asia and China in particular, emerged as strong economies, and economies that had the wherewithal to provide aid and assistance to the rest of us. Alongside that was China's own global aspirations. The aspirations of the People's Republic of China can be seen from two fundamental documents that they have produced globally and is widely available. One is a document that is called China's Peaceful Rise to the right, which basically explains their global ambitions. So China do have global ambitions. The second major issue that we have to look at is the Silk Road project that they have, termed in various ways, various terminologies have been used. So that has basically set the stage for China to be, and when I say China, I refer to the People's Republic of China, rise was in response to the crisis that the Western world faced and the rise of China at the time to deliver on aid and development. The Chinese do not describe it as hegemony per se. It is
Well,
simply
Dr. Fletcher, I would respectfully push back on that. They're not describing it as hegemony. Then how do you mentioned earlier that it's about influence? I mean, what is the difference between influence and hegemony? Hegemony is in essence uh, 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 um, a method by which you are exerting influence, right?
right.
Whether that is cultural influence, whether that is economic influence, and of course, Mr. Minister David and I will get into that later. But how do you respond? I mean, I do not understand how you can reconcile the two, influence versus hegemony.
Right. Hegemony denotes, Kellon, a forced using extreme force to impose on others. Using extreme force. Hegemony really denotes that notion. I would say that what we are experiencing is a Caribbean that is void of internal development dynamics that has found itself now by politicians and by poor policy making positions and decisions where they are going out now to grab at whatever aid and assistance they can find, irregardless of the consequences, especially the long-term consequences on the Caribbean people. And we have seen that begin to happen in Africa, in Asia, and certainly it's going to happen within our own region because we do not have an independent space by which we can influence and which we can negotiate, not influence, sorry, where we can negotiate ourselves out of this. In fact, I have coined the phrase recently, Kellon, probably I first said Grenada, but it's probably the Caribbean that cannot say no because we have found ourselves in a development paradigm of being recipients of aid,
Dr. Fletcher,
able to negotiate ourselves.
I'm sorry, can you lower your camera? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Can you lower your screen? There you go.
Right, great.
With your Hawaii shirt. Go ahead.
All right. So where we are, in fact, we're in a position, an unfortunate position, Kellon, where we are out there grabbing at it. So one of the fundamental differences is that whereas, for example, and I've identified 5 of those, whereas in the Western construct, the Western powers will say, in order for you to get my aid, you must do A, B, C, and D. The People's Republic, on the other hand, says, I am going to use my aid to influence the outcomes, what I want. All right. So one is saying, put things in place first, put policies, and I will give you aid. The other one is saying, I will give you aid, supposedly no strings attached, but that in the process of that transfer and the use of that aid, we see other things begin to emerge. Now, whether it is planned by the PRC or whether by our own governments who fail to disclose the agreements that they are signing with the peoples of the countries is another matter. This we have to find out.
But it does appear that you are indicting Caribbean governments, not only Caribbean governments, but governments in developing countries, perhaps for not having the capacity to properly negotiate the terms under which they are entreating with China. Is that a fair assessment, Dr. Fletcher?
I think, Kellon, it will be fair to say when we look at what's happening throughout the developing world, and you look at the agreements, and you look at how, for example, the non-payment or the actual default of a loan would lead to the PRC taking charge of key ports and other projects, it tells you that there is an issue regarding the way we negotiate.
Okay.
I think there's a definite issue there.
Because, I mean, a number of countries, I mean, you have Djibouti, you have Sri Lanka, then you had issues with Kenya. And to my mind, it would appear that China is playing a game of chess, whereas developing countries are playing checkers that are cyclical based on 5-year election cycles.
I would endorse that view, Kelon, to a large extent, that we that policymakers in our region and in other countries of the world are in an aid, and let us not put everyone in that category. Some of it happens because there is a thirst for development, however that is defined. But the kind of developments that we are seeing coming out of the PRC is glitz and glamour, not really fundamentally internally looking policies that improves the quality of lives of our people, but more the dazzle that will get us the next vote, that get the politician in the next election cycle. And therefore, it appears to me, from the evidence, global evidence, that developing countries have put themselves in a position where they are, by their own free will, they are accepting terms and conditions for these loans and grants that have put them in a disadvantageous position.
Right.
So that our resources have been put in the hands of Chinese. There is no xenophobia. I heard people trying to say, oh, it's anti-Chinese and so on. But it is a concern for the development. And let us not forget, Kelon and listeners, that we took similar position in this region, for example, against US investments. We used to talk about strings attached, and we were against that string attached. So the Caribbean fundamentally has always been recipient of aid that we are unable to impose and press on it our own terms and actual conditions. Okay. We are recipient of that aid, and we have to go along with it.
Definitely. Dr. Fletcher, this requires a deeper and a larger conversation. I'm going to give the Honorable Peter David a chance to respond later in the second segment in our wrap-up. But unfortunately, he's the outgoing Minister of Foreign Affairs. So his wings, shall we say, might have been clipped on this issue. But we will definitely want to have a broader discussion, because I think, and Dr. Fletcher, the other thing that I've observed is that there are not a lot of researchers who are actually doing this work to really track and follow China's involvement in the Caribbean region. And I think it is critical, as the both of us, we wear scholarly hats, that we begin to study this, not necessarily from the lens of what the West might be saying, right? Because of course, the West would have a particular narrative that would fit their concerns, right? But it's certainly an issue that I would want to bring you back for a broader discussion. And thank you again, Dr. Fletcher, for agreeing to appear on the report. Folks, stay with us. We will be right back for our discussion on the diaspora policy. Thank you. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
What we are now seeing is very significant, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. And this is what my work has been doing for the last few years, trying to document the other flows. So for example, we know from some of the data and the research that we've done that tourism in relation to the diaspora is very significant in several countries all around the region. So, for example, in Guyana and Suriname, we know that 60 to 70% of the tourist arrivals are from the diaspora. But in countries like Jamaica and Dominican Republic, where tourism is a huge industry, as much as 30 to 40% of the arrivals are from the diaspora. What this means is that if there weren't diasporas and they weren't traveling back home, that in places like Guyana and Suriname, there would be no tourism industry. There would be no hotel plant. The cost of traveling there would be significantly more expensive. And we already know that they contribute, like in the case of Jamaica, 5% to 10% and as much as 15% of the earnings for the tourism sector in that economy. And that's just the stuff that we can count.
All right, welcome back, folks. And let me take this opportunity to welcome our guests. First, His Excellency Derek James, Grenada's Ambassador for Diaspora Affairs, who's also the Consul General, Grenada's Consul General in Toronto. The Honorable Peter David, the newly minted Minister of Agriculture. Some say he has been demoted, but that is a discussion for another time. He's always smiling. It's a pleasure to have you back, Honorable David, and I hope you will not be storming out on the program, but I digress this morning.
I assure you I won't.
And I have Tricia Mitchell Darius, who has been working with the International Organization of Migration, and Tesfa Peterson, as we discussed earlier, who is a postdoctoral, well, you're not postdoctoral, you're a PhD candidate still. Let me not jinx you yet, but thank you folks for appearing this morning. Now we're discussing the diaspora policy that's still in its draft form. And I actually want to begin with you, MP David. I know that diaspora is something that you have been concerned about. Now in the policy talks about establishing an Office of Diaspora Engagement in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, Minister David, while all that is well and good, some may feel that that they still would get the bureaucratic runaround. And let me explain what I mean by that. There is the perception that when you're in the process of donating something to Grenada, right? So, for example, His Excellency Derek James here would be a good point of contact in Canada or New York or wherever it is, right? The items get to Grenada. Okay, you call up a particular ministry, then they tell you need to call this ministry, you need to talk to this person, and you need to talk to that person. Within the current policy framework that you have, how will that change? How do you envision the diaspora desk changing that? Because that's a major concern that people have.
Yes, thanks, Kellen, and thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure speaking to Grenadians in the diaspora and locally. Yes, you ask a serious question, because one of the problems we've found over the years is persons in the diaspora. For example, you have all nurses organizations, community organizations, and they all try to do their best to help Grenada. And then they contact Grenada, and then you have the bureaucracy intervene to either cause 5 different organizations to send the same thing, which means that on the docks you'll have the same thing. So you have an oversupply of some things. You have persons who send stuff that stuck on the docks because they don't know how to get through the tax issue of exemptions and concessions. So yes, all of the issues related to that will be streamlined through the Office of Diaspora Affairs. In other words, they will have a one-stop shop, hopefully, where all this diaspora office will not only help them to get things in, but will also coordinate with the diaspora community in order to determine what we need. So, for example, we hope as part of the policy to establish an umbrella organization where persons can determine, do we need beds for the hospital? Do we need medication? Do we need more footballs or cricket bats, whatever, and coordinate not only them coming into Grenada, but the determination as to whether or not these things are going to be useful. Many times persons send things to schools that turn out not to be useful. So the Office of Diaspora Affairs will be working with the diaspora with everything related to diaspora Grenada relationship.
Ambassador James, I know you have been working with Trisha Mitchell, Darius, on formulating this policy. Now that we have a draft policy in place, I get the sense that the conversations that have been had really surrounds people in North America and Europe. How do we ensure that that policy gets wide traction and wide attention to Grenadians who are in other parts of the world?
Thanks for Kellen, for having me this morning, and it's a pleasure to be here. As a recent question, we have engaged not only people just in North America and Europe. In fact, only recently, Honorable Minister David had an engagement with some of our nationals living in the United Arab Emirates. And that is part of our calling. I have had conversations with our people in the Caribbean. For example, I had a conversation with our honorary consul in Jamaica, who has engaged our Grenadians in Jamaica. We have also had conversations in Trinidad. We have reached out to other people. We have had feedback from other people in the Caribbean and not just in North America or Europe. So we are trying to embrace Grenadians wherever they are and not just zeroing on any particular region in the world. And we are going to continue to look for our Grenadians wherever they are. That is why we place a policy on the website, and we distribute it as widely as possible so that our Grenadians wherever they are. But we are going to continue to reach out to our nationals wherever they are. And this is just the start of the process. Even when we have a plan for when the policy is ready, the final policy, to have it distributed and discussions. Also, we have engaged our Grenadians in Grenada to have their input in the policy. We have had part of our survey we had feedback from stakeholders in Grenada, people in the banking sector, people in the health sector, and other sectors in Grenada. They were part of giving us feedback for the policy, so we could put this policy together.
Trisha, the ambassador speaks about feedback. How much of that feedback was incorporated into that final document, and what was excluded from that document? If you can speak to perhaps, I guess just trying to reconcile how you manage that feedback within the document.
Sure. Kalon, thank you for having me on the program. And I want to say, I don't know if it's the morning or afternoon, but hello to all of our viewers. Thanks for the question. And I want to say that we have included all feedback that we've received, whether it be from stakeholders in Grenada. So working with the policy consultant, Dr. Ying, who created a stakeholder survey in two versions. One version was for our local stakeholders in Grenada. So that included categories like academia, the public service, private service, the churches, the media, as many sectors as we can possibly cover, as well as it included all persons in the diaspora, as many as we can reach, as a matter of fact. We also included, I don't know if you cast your memory back to 2010, when we had both the preparatory conference and then the initial homecoming conference.
I remember that very well.
Definitely.
The Honorable Peter was in the other party at the time. But I digress. Let's give it
Helen, you like bacchanal. But yes. But yes, we included, there were several small focus groups that formed part of that homecoming and also leading up to those conferences. There were several working groups out in the diaspora that put together papers and they wrote articles. And so all of that information was funneled directly to our policy consultant. Also, we hosted some diaspora virtual conferences with the diaspora, as well as we conducted some we did some visits to. We visited London. We also visited Washington, and we also did Toronto. Unfortunately, we were able to continue with those visits because of COVID. But all of the information, all of those sessions were recorded, minutes were taken, and all of that was funneled to the policy consultant. So I feel like we've really done a good job of ensuring that we incorporate all feedback as possible into this policy. And you would see that if you read through the policy, you will see that in some cases the consultant included direct quotes from some from feedback that we received. We also received feedback via email to the Office of Diaspora Affairs email that we also incorporated as well.
Okay, someone is saying, interestingly, the opposition was not engaged during that process. Can you speak to that? I mean, you did say that the opposition will be engaged moving forward.
So I can speak to that. I can confirm that the opposition, as well as our main, so our sitting opposition, as well as the main opposition party, they have received a copy of the draft policy, and this is the Grenada leg of the final consultations. Okay. So I know as well that moving forward, we will have a more formalized consultation with them, so that their feedback will be incorporated into the final version of the policy.
Okay, as
we want this. I want to make a comment here.
Yes.
In as much as we as individual members of the diaspora are political in our own right, but when you speak to Grenadians out in the diaspora, their main concern is Grenada. And this is really what we've tried to capture in the policy. So we really want to keep this as non-partisan as possible. I mean, I know if you go back again to 2010, 2011, we've had, we did the preparatory conference, then we had the homecoming, and then there was a lull because there was a change in minister. Okay, there was also a change in
government.
Yeah, there was a change in government as well. Thank you. And it took a while for us to get back here. Actually, it took 12 years for us to get back here. And so we're really trying to ensure that this time around that it is different. And so if there are areas that you feel that we're failing, we're being very open and transparent. Please, you can email us at diaspora@mofa.gov.gd, or get in touch with your councils if you're out in the diaspora, or your high commission. We're being very, very open because we really want at the end of the day that this is going to be a policy that is not just for Grenadians, but it's of mutual benefit, not just to our country, Grenada, but also to our persons like you and I, Kellan, that live out in the diaspora, who, we really want to contribute our skills, we want to contribute our talents, because we're so grateful for what we've gotten from this little land of ours.
All right, I'm going to bring in Tesfa. Tesfa, you bring in a diverse lens to this. Have you had the chance to look at the policy?
I have had the chance to look at the policy.
And having looked at the policy, if you were to make any changes or adjustments to it, or any suggestions, what would those suggestions be?
Again, thank you for having me on. Thank you. This panel are my people, so this is a very collaborative conversation. And hey, Trish. And Trisha and I come out of the legacy of Ambassador James and so on, as she was speaking about the former diaspora arrangements that were in place in 2010, 2011. For me, and this is a discussion that Trisha and I have had before, and this is really where I come down on this, is that the policy instrument that is being circulated at the moment has a very prescriptive quality to it. It's emanating from supranational organizations. It's emanating from places like the IOM. It's emanating from prescriptions around remittances that are coming from the World Bank, etc. And so it's a very technically sound policy instrument. However, what I believe it lacks is a little taste of Grenada. I think that when we are doing policy, policy needs to be tied to context. It needs to be tied to the indigenous frame. And while feedback and so on is absolutely important, and I do believe that Trisha is doing a good job of soliciting feedback, I think that one of the things that policy must speak to is the actual reality on the ground. And what I find in the current policy is that there's a lot of reference to business, there's a lot of reference to development that is framed through a financial lens. And there's a lot of reference. So part of the policy talks about bringing in the investments of Grenadian elites in the diaspora. I think that that is something that we need to look at, given what I know from my research about the demographic composition of the Grenadian diaspora and the Caribbean diaspora generally. Research shows that we have a very feminized diaspora, that it's a lot of the times it's women who are migrating out of the Caribbean and out of Grenada in order to shore up their household structures, in order to take care of their familial and community obligations. And so a policy that is aimed at a sort of elite subject of diaspora, especially in the context of Grenada, I think maybe that is something that we need to consider in tandem with what we know to be the character of our diaspora.
But you talk about, I'm going to push back a little bit there, because you talk about so the IOM is a UN organization, correct? It is a United Nations organization.
As of very recently.
Which, as of recently, but that would add some unilateralism to the character of the organization, would it not? That's my first pushback there. The second thing, you talk about the financial the character of the policy, but realistically, if you were to look at it, I mean, we contribute as diasporans. Again, the notion of elite. Again, the notion of elite, that can be unpacked as well. But with respect to what we contribute, and people who go to Western Union are not necessarily elitist when they send money home back, to their families, and remittances contribute to working people in Grenada. So
that is precisely my point. Is precisely my point. The point is that remittances. What is the work that remittances is doing? Remittances is doing the work of, like you said, shoring up families, taking care of working class people, and remittances are being sent for the most part by working class people. That is precisely my point. And remittances account for a large portion of GDP around the Caribbean.
In Grenada, it's about 4 to 5%, I believe. Yes.
Right. And in Jamaica, we know it's a lot higher than that.
Correct.
And it contributes to that because the economic realities drive migration, right? And migration is a function of economic realities, and then people go abroad in order to I would make reference to myself, who on the surface went abroad to study, but that in the process of studying was always aware that part of what would happen when I was successful out there was that I would help family members and so on. So there's always that aspect to it. And my work and my scholarship looks at what is driving remittances. Are remittances being driven by a need to help the state, to shore up the state, or are remittances being driven by our familial obligations, by a desire to help our communities, etc.? So
you propose that it's the latter.
I propose that it's the latter. Exactly.
Okay. So all right. So if you're proposing that it's the latter, I'm just trying to, I guess, understand how perhaps what suggestions you can offer, because right now that policy, I believe, would be taken to Grenada, and there would be consultations in Grenada. And following those consultations, I believe the intention would be to bring that to Parliament. I believe the minister can give me some more information on that. Minister, I'm going to bring you in here. with respect to what Tesfa has been saying, you can, respond to what it's been saying. But what happens to that policy once we were able to make those adjustments and things like that?
Well, first of all, yeah, with respect to Tesla's comments, I think she's making some absolutely important comments there. The issue of remittances going to individual families is something that we are all aware of and understand its importance, because without remittances, GDP would be way under what it is at the moment. But also there are community groups who do, you may call it remittances, but assist community groups. So for example, I think that every school that there is in Grenada has a community group somewhere in the diaspora attached to it, be it the Vincent's Government School or the Wesley College also. So there is that whole package. I have always said that the further away Grenadians go from Grenada, the more patriotic they become. So I agree with Tesfa in that regard, that it must not be seen as the elite, but Grenadians in the diaspora contribute, and they continue to contribute. But I think where we have been lacking and where there's been a lot of pushback is investments in larger projects. So for example, I am going to be the Minister of Agriculture. I'm excited if a group of Grenadians who show that interest in agriculture can come together and do a small manufacturing plant, establish some kind of hydroponics greenhouse in Grenada, come together. I think one of the difficulties we've had is that, I remember people saying a partnership is a leaky ship growing up, but no, a partnership is a good ship. And that Grenadians and the diaspora can get together. I remember once my good friend Jerry Edwin spoke about a diaspora bond. So there are many models in which we can use a diaspora for larger investment projects while continuing what Tesfa talks about, which is the diaspora linkages to the community. So I absolutely agree that it must not be seen as the elite of Grenada linking with the elite in the diaspora. It must be seen as Grenadians. I believe, essentially, my view of the diaspora project is to extend the diaspora, extend Grenada, to anywhere a Grenadian resides. With the technology we have, we may be speaking to a Grenadian now in Nigeria or in Kenya. They may be online. Why can't we find ways to get them more engaged? With respect to where the policy goes, the policy is going to be submitted, yes, laid in Parliament. It's going to be laid in Parliament eventually, because I do not believe that this policy should be subject to the whims and fancies of any political party or individual ministers.
All right. It seems as though we've lost Minister David there. But I'm going to bring in, he's back. There you are, Mr. David.
Yes, I am saying that the diaspora policy should not be seen as a partisan document, as a partisan project. Grenadians, its diaspora project is a project for all Grenadians. And yes, it will be laid in Parliament, and the opposition and everybody will be part of that discussion.
Mr. David, one of the suggestions that Wilbur Thomas is making there, who, incidentally, he's involved in a lot of philanthropy for Grenada. He says Grenadians don't get the same concessions that foreign investors receive. Now, what would the policy do?
That is not actually true. GIDC has concessions for every investor. Okay. If a Grenadian comes from New York, or if you come from Washington, Kellan, when you finish your PhD and you decide to come down to establish an agricultural project, you will get concessions from GIDC.
Perhaps in marijuana cultivation. There we go. Go ahead.
There we go. Let's see. I hope by that time we won't have to arrest you for it. But but no, I think Wilbur is reflecting a perception that there are concessions for Grenadians and concessions for foreigners. If a Grenadian comes in, or a Grenadian in Grenada decides to invest, he or she will receive the concessions. Again, the concessions at GIDC are for all persons willing to invest.
Minister James, back to you. With respect to, now you indicated that the draft policy talks about the role of the consulates and the embassies and things like that as the first points of contact when people need to provide support to Grenadians. But that already happens. So again, I don't understand why that is also in the policy when we can actually go to those embassies. Again, what would be different?
Well, look, Kellan, is just the same thing like you're saying, like we have organizations in the diaspora that contribute to Grenada, and they are just continue. What this policy is about is creating a structure for the engagement of the diaspora. And as such, the embassies and the consulates will continue to play the role. But also, in this period of the policy, we're looking for them to provide more information, coordination. For example, if there is an event in Grenada, for diaspora event in Grenada, they would play a critical role in assisting in the mobilization of diaspora. And then we have diaspora organizations who would have to work with the consulate. But we have to also look at ways of strengthening the functions of the embassies and consulates as it relates to diaspora affairs and it relates to dealing with our nationals. Now, remember that the Israelis who have been powerful with the diaspora, the Italians, the Indians, and so on, use the diaspora in the development, and the consulate and embassies play a critical role in that development. So we want to make sure that the structure we've put together in the policy is one where our embassies, our consulate will play a critical role in information dissemination. For example, if we're looking for somebody to take a position in Grenada, they will play a critical role in assisting that together and work closely with the diaspora organizations. When we talk about diaspora organizations, we're not talking about the Nurses Association in the different parts of the region or alumni and so on. We understand they have to continue, but remember there are individuals who are not part of these organizations that want to play their role and want to contribute towards the diaspora initiative, and we have to give them an avenue for that. So the embassies and consulates have their role to play, but we have to strengthen their responsibility when it comes to the diaspora.
Strengthen their responsibility, but I'm going to bring in Minister David. I mean, Minister David, some embassies and consulates, at this point at least, there are issues with capacity. For example, in New York, the New York consulate, I do not believe that there is an officially appointed consul general there, right? So if we're talking about strengthen the capacity of the embassy, how would policymakers in St. George's, meaning the government, ensure that the embassies have the capacity to do that? Minister David, can you hear me? I don't think
you broke up there for a bit, so I didn't get the last.
So yes, I'm asking, can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, I'm saying, how do we strengthen the capacity of the embassies? A lot of Grenadians are concerned, for example, that in New York, the consulate in New York does not have the capacity to address all of their concerns, right? And now we are piling on another proposal for them to service the Grenadian community. So how do we do that? And again, that is a policy question. That's not something Mr. James can answer.
No, I agree with those who speak about capacity in our diplomacy in general. I think that small island developing states, I'm not sure if you're hearing me.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
In small island developing states, we all have challenges we have challenges with respect to capacity and employment. We have serious challenges, particularly now when
All right, we lost Minister David.
Kalan, if I could come in there a little bit.
Yes, go ahead.
Because one of the things that we also looking at in this policy, and it was a discussion that we had, is, for example, and that will assist in a question of capacity. For example, if there is a meeting in New York in the UN and it deals with women's affairs, it may not be necessary to take somebody from Grenada to go to that UN meeting. Instead, we could find somebody, and that way the embassy or the consulate comes in to assist in identifying someone or a group of people who can go to that meeting to represent Grenada and then provide feedback for us. So it is not just a one-fold thing, and we have to understand also that this diaspora initiative is not just to get people to divert material to Grenada and knowledge to Grenada, but we have to also bring another side of it to the diaspora, to bring benefits also to the diaspora, to engage the diaspora, to have the diaspora have a say in the development of our country.
Okay,
not just but also in the policies and so on. The diaspora was given an opportunity to have a say in different policies development.
Okay, Tricia, you've been waiting in the wings there. You said you wanted to respond to something that Tesfa said earlier.
Yes, I just wanted to make a little bit of a clarification here. Um, so I completely agree with Tesfa on the point that I mean remittances, generally speaking, are driven by emotion, and they are driven by, in large part, by responsibility, right? And that's why a lot of the times we have the feminization of the diaspora, as Tesfa spoke about. But
Mhm.
in terms of the policy, when there are certain, there are a couple different strategies that are outlined in the policy. And those strategies are: one, to reduce the cost of transfer for those remittances, whether they're emotionally driven or responsible, or or driven by responsibility, as well as um, to enable the Caribbean region, so whether it's CARICOM or the OECS, to work together to achieve that as a goal, so that our persons who are receiving remittances, and we know that those remittances are usually used, they're used for healthcare costs, they're used for schooling, they're used for more household consumption, that in reducing the cost to send the cost on the diaspora to send these remittances, then it means that our locals on the ground will actually receive more. As well as we want
But
to take a
Trisha,
look at.
Trisha, I'm sorry. Just to clarify there, you mentioned that you want to reduce the cost of money transfers and things like that.
Yes.
That would require. I mean, realistically, these flows, these capital flows, uh, are dependent on the kindness of the neoliberalism of the United States, right? They're the ones who impose those fees, and I see Tesfa smiling and nodding, right? So how do we? What would that strategy look like? And of course, I'm going to bring in Minister David in a second. Minister,
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah, we
if I may,
we're going
Let
to
me
get,
just
yes, Tesfa,
right there.
herein lies the power of the diaspora.
right?
The diaspora, these guys make money off of the diaspora.
Uh-huh.
These guys, Western Union, MoneyGram, etc., make money. Now, if we go on a campaign, you remember the international campaign in South Africa, you remember the impact of that. I think sometimes we underestimate the strength of the diaspora itself. For example, one of the strengths that the diaspora have is to influence local politics. Kellen, you've been very much involved in local politics in the United States. If we were to combine our energies and our efforts in the interest of Grenada, in other words, if the interest of Grenada requires us to vote Mr. X, then Mr. X should, the Grenadian diaspora, I mean, I'm not suggesting that will just be everybody will vote similarly, but at least we must link everything we do to the development of the country. And that is one of the purposes of the diaspora policy. So, for example, if Western Union decides they're not reducing, a MoneyGram could be, we go to MoneyGram and Western Union, whichever one decides they're going to reduce, that's where we're going to tell our diaspora to go to. So while the cost is determined by international banking regulations, as Richard Simbalad, my friend in Canada, is saying there, we can have an influence on it if we use the strength of our pockets and our political strength to influence. I do not believe it is a fait accompli. I do not believe we are mere subjects in this objects in these matters. We can influence these things, and I think that is what. If there's one thing I want the diaspora to know, it's the strength they have to influence policy where they are and in Grenada at the same time.
And
That's just my comment in reference.
The other thing is,
I hope
if I
that
could
strength.
cut in.
Go ahead, Trisha. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm saying the other point around remittances here is that there are other ways of remitting. I mean, in Kenya, for instance, or even as a matter of fact, let me use a better example. In India, there are several different money remittances agencies. And some of those are apps that are online that their diaspora has helped them to create. And so, some of them have moved away from some of the bigger companies like the MoneyGram and the Western Union. So, what this policy, what including that in the policy gives the government of Grenada, as well as the governments in the region, the opportunity to do is to come together and to brainstorm strategies whereby they can affect how remittances are sent.
Okay, Tesfa.
Yes. I think we're segueing into something that is of interest to me as well as a scholar, something around regionalism. One of the things that I think that diaspora policy in the Caribbean is maybe not taking advantage of as much, or maybe should pursue more at the level of CARICOM, as Trisha mentioned, or as someone mentioned, at the level of the ECCB, is regional interest. We speak about the Indian diaspora. The Indian diaspora is massive in terms of numbers. And I respectfully, Minister Davis' assertion that the diaspora does have that kind of power. However, you need power in numbers as well. And estimates for the Grenadian diaspora are at 67,000. I don't know if that's a very accurate estimate, but that's what the
That
policy
is
is saying.
official. Yeah,
That is
that's what we can find in terms of statistics from host countries. But of course, we know that we have a huge undocumented population as well, and that does not take into consideration second and third generation. So
right.
it's
So I think
a very loose statistic. Yeah.
I think that I'm gonna go back to the old days of people like T.A. Marichaud and so on, who had a vision of regionalism. And I think that our diaspora policies generally throughout the Caribbean region, as a matter of fact, can benefit from a more regional approach. I think that there's not a lot of difference between a Jamaican who is living in Grenada, who is living abroad, and a Grenadian who is living abroad. And I think that that's an aspect also of policy. For example, the gentleman who is making the who is responsible for our diaspora policy and is sort of running the show, Mr. Ying, as I understand it,
Mr. Ying is a Jamaican, by the way.
He is right.
Jamaican. He's an Afro-Jamaican. I just want to put that out there.
Exactly.
For those who have been messaging me privately, he's not Chinese, he's African.
Right.
Okay.
And so there are a lot of synergies, I think, to be pursued. I'm really happy to be at the beginning stages of diaspora policy in Grenada. It's exciting for me. I think it's something that, as a researcher, I'm going to be following for the rest of my research career. And so it's, as everybody on this panel has pointed to, this is the beginning stages of it. I have my ideas. I read a comment earlier where somebody said, we still believe that trickle-down economics is going to do the trick. And I have a lot of ideas around that, coming from a feminist background.
Ideas around reimagining trickle-down economics?
Reimagining economics itself, understanding that economics, it's classical economics as we understand it, that is filtered through the lens of financialization, through neoliberal capitalism, might not be the ideal for the Caribbean region, and how to reimagine how we do even that, how to understand that our economics are diverse. So I think that we are at the beginning stages of a really, really exciting conversation around diaspora, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Tessa Barry has a question to Minister David. I'm going to read that question here. Minister David, how do we influence how remittances are sent in countries such as Trinidad, where the issue of the Forex policy is in itself a major contributor to the operations of agencies such as Western Union and MoneyGram? You need to unmute your microphone, Mr. David.
Yes, I didn't get the full question. There's a word that was important.
Yeah, so how do we influence how remittances are sent in countries such as Trinidad, where the issue of the Forex, F-O-R-E-X policy is in itself a major contributor to the operations of agencies such as Western Union and MoneyGram?
No, we can influence it. As Trisha indicated, discussion. We have to have discussions with all of these agencies and with all of these policies. I think the point was made that sometimes we accept things the way they are, but we have to seek to influence these policies, including the policies indicated by the questionnaire. So my view, and I really am happy to hear Tessa's comments. In other words, she's thinking transformational rather than coming and accept the world as it is and accept all these arrangements as they are and accept economics for the way it was. And particularly, I'm excited about that new generation of rebels, as you call it, as we call it, because we need to have that new generation questioning, Kellon, people like yourself questioning what we consider to be old ways. So yeah, I believe with respect to Trinidad and Forex and all of that, we have to enter into negotiations. And I agree with Tesfa's comments, and I wanted to comment on that. That we
Yeah,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
sorry. We have to take a regional approach, and we have to speak to the Trinidad government, the Jamaica government, as a, Hugo Chavez said once, if we approach the international community like this, we fail. If we approach like this, we are much more powerful.
All right, folks, we will take a break. We will actually go up to 12:30 today because I think this is a very important discussion. And there are issues, as Minister David, I did indicate that we would be addressing those issues when you came back to the Bug report.
I saw you had a very a good discussion earlier about China. I'm very much interested in responding to those. So,
correct. Do not storm off the Bug report. I'll be right back.
We had a fantastic meeting, and the Grenada Diaspora Forum met for the first time, and we went through policy in detail. We did a page turn of the policy, and at the end of the meeting, a motion was passed unanimously to adopt the diaspora policy on behalf of the UK. So the policy has been accepted by the UK Diaspora. So
I'm part of the Diaspora program and so happy to be involved in this initiative. And tonight I voted in support of the Diaspora policy, and I'm looking forward to taking this program forward.
The debates were lively. We looked at aspects of the policy in terms of its structure. We looked at even some small things like the English used in it was American English, and obviously in the UK the English is subtly different. We don't use Z's as frequently as you guys over in America use it. So yeah, but it was very positive. It was very there was a unity in the forum today, and we had a mix of people from millennial who joined the forum, right the way through to the older generation. So from a legacy perspective, we've got Grenadians covering the spectrum in terms of age groups. We've also got lots of professional people in here as well. But yeah, it's been a fantastic evening. We achieved a lot, but what's really important is that the UK has accepted the diaspora policy.
All right, welcome back, folks. Before I get back to my guest this morning, I'm just going to read some of the comments that we're getting here. We've had some very interesting comments. John Kelly says, can we not set up a money transfer system for Grenada and not depend on those transfer systems such as the Western Union? Again, I don't know how easy that would be considering how integrated we are into the global financial system. Althea Kado says, Tesfa's trailblazing idea. We are operating under a European system that wasn't created by us. Africans practice group economics. Very interesting thought there. John Kelly says, look, Jamaica has their own money transfer system to Jamaica. Interesting. Kimberly says, and Western Union and MoneyGram have been using their power to lobby international organizations like the UN and shift policies in their favor. So yes, we have to use our collective power as individuals, but this also requires brave actions by our government officials. Wilbur Thomas says the policy should be a blueprint as a disruptor of the status quo. Doesn't make sense having the policy and we're doing things the same way. Moving forward with some other comments, and I'll get back to my guest. Can the government of Grenada establish a bank in the United States with different branches to facilitate the transfer of monies like Jamaica? Very interesting ideas coming through. Margaret responds to Althea, our problems begin with our trying to build new systems using the foundations of the colonial oppressor who we fought off. It just can't work. Of course, it's very interesting comments. I would get Tesfa to respond because I believe a lot of those comments were directed to you.
Thank you, Kellen, and thanks so much for that. I agree. Like I said, I come from a political economy tradition in terms of my scholarship, and so when I think of economics, I think not just of financials, but I also think of issues of social reproduction. The work that women do, for example, within the context of diaspora is extremely important to me. And I think that any kind of policy arrangement that we undertake in Grenada and elsewhere in the Caribbean, and again, I would like to just impose a regional frame on the kind of diaspora engagement that I'm looking at, needs to take into account the composition, the character of the Caribbean diaspora generally and the Grenadian diaspora in particular. And as some of the commenters said, question in the context of COVID, in the context of post-COVID, we've all observed that the economic arrangements will look very, very different in a post-COVID world. We've seen what some call the zenith of how neoliberal capital is able to structure the world. And so we need to be thinking outside of the box. I loved what Minister David referred to earlier on, that he is changing portfolios and going into agriculture and looking at ways
he is not, correction, he is not changing portfolios. The Prime Minister of Grenada changed.
Right. And what I think is a promotion, because I think agriculture is one of the urgent issues. Food sovereignty in particular is one of the urgent issues for the Caribbean. And I think having someone like Minister David, who has an appreciation for the overseas or the global sort of realities, being with us being in agriculture is going to produce a lot of very interesting synergies for agriculture.
Okay,
and
Tesfa, let me bring you back though. So you made a point earlier about regionalism. I mean, we have attempted, and you praised people like Tia Marisho. I mean, one might propose that regionalism is dead. Is it not?
It is not. It is not dead to me, and I don't think to others. And I think regionalism as an idea may have been for we might say it was more alive in a certain historical period. However, I think that in the face of a lot of nationalist sort of ethos that's happening, we see in places like the United States and elsewhere, there's that sort of nationalist fervor that's happening. I think that the Caribbean region needs to be looking at ways in which we can engage the world as a region. So as Minister David said, there are people like me who are interested in thinking regionally, and I don't believe that I'm the only one. And so I think diaspora policy, given the kinds of, and I agree that there are challenges, and however, in shifting consciousness around how we can approach economics as a region, how we can approach the global economy as a region, and given again the post-COVID context, I would be interested in thinking about how diaspora policy can be a way in which we begin to think regionally about how we engage the global economic system.
One final comment before I get back to a question, rather, before I get back to the other panelists. And I believe Mr. David wanted to respond, but I'll give you a chance to respond, Mr. David. You critique neoliberalism, but the current Prime Minister of Grenada is a neoliberal, right? He believes in liberalizing, whether it's the telecommunications sector, he believes in privatization. I mean, that is his economic a legacy, if you will, right? So, I mean, how do you reconcile that against the criticism that you're offering of neoliberalism in general?
Well, Mr. David said that some of us have to think transformationally. Some of us, especially those of us who are involved in scholarship, we cannot just accept the world as is. And so it is neither here nor there for me whether a head of state is neoliberal. I do believe that we have an obligation I am one of those people that believes that there is enough for everyone. And so neoliberalism makes us believe that there is lack, that we have to fight to get to the top of the pyramid. And I believe that there are different ways that we can engage with economics that do not have to necessarily follow a neoliberal frame. And somebody's commented, Pierre Motley is leading the way, and it's time for Caribbean leaders to listen. And I believe that there is a spark, especially, like I said, in a post-COVID world, it won't be business as usual. And so if I am on the leading edge of thinking outside of neoliberalism, then I'm fine with that.
Okay, Minister David, you wanted to respond?
Yes, two things on the question of neoliberalism versus any other model. I think one of the failings of us in the Caribbean is not to develop a model that reflects our own societies, our own history, our own economic base, because there is a need for our Caribbean intellectuals, and that is why I'm so happy that a person like Tesfa is doing it, to get to a model that really is based on who we are and what we are in the region. With respect to regionalism, I do not accept your pessimism about regionalism. The OECS is one of the models for regional integration. We have one currency, we have one judicial system, we have a Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority. So at the level of OECS, it is working, it is an excellent arrangement. At the level of CARICOM, it is not perfect, but we do have CSME, and we are trying to work out the details and the wrinkles in it. I mean, the regionalism that exists in Europe did not come easy. In fact, the Europeans have been using the OECS and the Caribbean integration movement as a model. So, Kellon, it will not be easy. There is always a tension between nationalism and regionalism. But I am happy to say that where the Caribbean is today is a far way forward from where persons like T.M. Marjo had it back in the 60s and 70s, and it's a work in progress. It's going to take time. There is always in countries a tendency to revert back to the nation state when there are difficulties confronting us, particularly in times like COVID. There is a temptation to believe you can do it alone, and that nationalism is not in a region alone. Where you live today is where nationalism has become risen to a level of paranoia. So I think we in the region are doing well. I agree with people like Tess for the next generation. Please do not give up the integration project. The project is moving, and I do believe that we are more powerful as small island developing states coming together than we are remaining. Grenada is really not a player on the international scene. You know, one of the most important things, Kellon, if I may say this, when people approach us as CARICOM, they respect us. Each person who is going to head the WTO has approached CARICOM to get their support. We have to leverage that support, and I think regionalism is alive and well.
Okay, speaking of leverage, we will segue into talk about leverage. Shall we talk about leverage with respect to the People's Republic of China? Minister David, in Parliament 2 weeks ago, you couched your defense of Grenada's diplomatic relations with China in terms of xenophobia. You suggested that some Grenadians at least were engaging in xenophobic talk with respect to China. Dr. Fletcher soundly rejected that. What makes you think that this is an argument about xenophobia as opposed to a debate around concern for perhaps their growing influence in Grenada?
I also said in Parliament, I welcome a debate about a genuine debate on the issue of our relations with the People's Republic of China. I welcome that.
Yes.
But you know, Maurice Bishop had a saying years ago when he was Prime Minister of Grenada that when the North sneezes, we catch the cold. There is a high level of xenophobia taking place in North America. Just put on the TV tonight, I'm sure there will be an attempt to, the China virus, this and that. So I'm talking about it in the context of those persons. While they accept trillions of dollars in Chinese investment, China holds 1/3 of U.S. national debt. The People's Republic of China. Billions, $145 billion worth of investment is in the U.S. from China. In Great Britain, in 1 year, there was $8 billion worth of Chinese investment. So when I talk about xenophobia, I'm talking about those countries that will have us I'm not talking about the debate that we're having, but there are persons who would have us reject Chinese cooperation while they themselves are engaged deeply in Chinese investment. So I'm referring to an attempt by some people in the world to determine for us who we have a relationship with. Now, with respect to Chinese investments in Grenada, my dear friend and colleague Stephen Fletcher talked about, the Chinese investment in Grenada and in the regions is glitz and glamour. Utter nonsense, absolute nonsense. In Grenada, the Chinese have invested in education by scholarships going to China. Kellen, there was a time when CEDA scholarships. There were times when scholarships to the US was the scholarships we received. Today, the scholarships we get are from China, from Cuba, from countries like Serbia, countries like Russia. We have to find alternative sources. The truth is that traditional sources of investment, and I agree, we are dependent on external investment. The Caribbean was born on external investments into the region. But China has not been a country that has done investments with us in a way it was done in the past. Healthcare, education, agriculture, those housing, those are the areas we have investment in. And there is no, Mr. Fletcher spoke about the terms of the agreements. Which terms is he specifically referring to? What terms of any agreement? The only debt China has in Grenada at the moment is a debt we are about to enter with respect to assistance for the international airport reconstruction of the new, not runway, but the new taxiway. Other than that, there's no Chinese debt, there's Chinese assistance. So I don't understand.
I'm going to give Fletcher the chance to respond. Dr. Fletcher?
Yeah, sure. My pleasure to respond to Minister David. Minister David, couple things. I don't think you heard accurately on some of the points I made. I referred to the terms of the agreement, and I specifically said, Minister David, that we are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say that the terms are not favorable? But then how can you say the terms are not favorable? You don't know the terms.
So, no. Minister, okay. I think you have some misunderstandings. I do not think that you heard all that I said, and you seems to be picking and choosing points that you wish to make on the basis of your perception of what I have said, and not on the basis of what I have said. I specifically said that we are not aware of the terms, and some of those terms and conditions are not brought out to the public. I draw reference to situations where in other parts of the world that governments enter into agreements, and then what we see as the end result is when debts are defaulted upon, we have the Chinese, we then learn, of course, the Chinese will go in and take control of certain enterprises. I am not, and let me make this abundantly clear to you, Minister, I'm not in no way against Chinese investments. In fact, I started off by tracking and mentioning the fact that we have always relied on foreign direct investment. It's an inherent part of us. So I just want to redirect you there so that you can have your concept of what I said in a better place. Secondly, I think you made the first point that you referred as utter nonsense. To use your words, I would not use such word to describe anything you have said if I disagree with you.
And I won't have any problem if you do, because it's how I refer to it. I have no difficulty if you did.
Right. So let me respond to you. So it's likewise. On the issue of glitz and glamour of it, what I was pointing to, and I've said this on this program before, that our development model needs to go beyond concrete, beyond the glitz and glamour of things. And you are agreeing with me that fundamentally you needs to go deeper than just the concrete. It needs to go into the kind of areas that I am fully aware of that Chinese investments have gone into. And I made the point further. That it is about our policymakers and what our policymakers negotiate and what our policymakers implement. And I rejected the issue of Chinese hegemony. That's the first point, Minister. So you need to take what I say in context, Minister, and do not pick and choose and be selective for whatever reason you want to be in picking and choosing mid statements and pulling out and then appearing to be very, very bullish, if I may say so, in your response.
Okay,
but I will not disrespect you.
Okay, so here's the deal.
Stephen, we are both big guys. We can both argue without you saying that. I'm not being bullish. I'm just being passionate about what you said, because you did say that Caribbean governments, in relation to Chinese aid, must not deal with glitz and glamour. And I'm saying in response to that, and the reason I refer to it that way is that Chinese aid has come in agriculture, it has come in housing, it has come in education, it has come in healthcare, in many ways. So I am not sure. Look, Cuba, for example, has been the donor for several areas, inclusive of areas with respect to China. The US, and Kellen, you know this, the US has recently intervened to try to stop the Caribbean from receiving such aid. And I put our Chinese assistance in a similar vein. Now, I agree with one thing Stephen is saying. I agree that our countries must negotiate good terms, but I believe that with respect to China in particular, I can discuss it the other areas, but with respect to China, I have not seen any area where Grenada's independence, Grenada's control of its destiny is affected by Chinese aid. China and Grenada has pursued a policy of non-interference. Tell me a single area that has been affected, and I will respond.
Minister, okay, here is the deal. This is what I would say about this. There is not a Freedom of Information Act in Grenada, right? So to the extent that, for example, if right now I want to have an examination of the diplomatic agreement that you have with China, right, with respect to
that is open. That is an open book.
It's an open book, okay, because I would want to examine those, right, in order to then create an informed judgment about, because here is the deal. There is the perception that, you know, China is the new Santa Claus in the region, right? Nobody gives anything away for free. There has to be some kind of quid pro quo there. Again, that is a perception that people have. And it is based on the evidence that we witness in other countries where the Chinese have been garnishing ports, airports, railways, right? For countries that are defaulting on debt obligations that they have with China. So I think that is a concern that people have. We are almost out of time. I said we are going to be done.
Helen, if I may just respond quickly to this. I'm happy to know that the minister has already redirected his phrase and said that Stephen Fletcher says that the Caribbean must not deal with glitz and glamour. Thank you very much, Minister David. We'll end on that note. All right.
All right.
We'll end on that note.
Thank you. But this discussion has to continue. And before I bring in the panel, two final questions, Mr. David, and then we're going to wrap up on Diaspora. You are now going to be reassigned to the Ministry of Agriculture, a town man going into sort of a rural enterprise, shall we say. You have been critiqued, or I should say denigrated, perhaps is another term that other folks use, that you were demoted into the Ministry of Agriculture. Some say is that your wings have been clipped. You know, the Prime Minister is keeping you home. I guess perhaps an election is coming up soon, and he wants you to engage with the masses there. Going into, I know that you said you had a meeting with the Minister last week of Agriculture. What are some of your first, I guess, priorities? Mind you, the Ministry of Agriculture is heavily underbudgeted, by the way, based on
I think the first thing, as I said last week, and I repeat, there's only one Minister of Agriculture sitting at any one time, so I wouldn't go into any details, but I think you do appreciate that. But certainly, I met with the Minister. I am happy to be going into the Ministry of Agriculture. I think those who suggest it's a demotion, well, I am happy with it, because I believe it's important that we address one of the most important pillars of the economy. So I look forward to my first agenda item is to meet with the farmers, meet with all the stakeholders. And I disagree with you when you say that agriculture is a district thing or country thing. No, agriculture concerns all of us. Just like tourism concerns the people in the north, agriculture concerns the people in the south. And I, as a person who is very much interested in development, look forward to working on agriculture. I'll be prepared to come back to speak with you, Kellen, at some time in the future once I get fully briefed, once I meet with the farmers. But I look forward, and I look forward with serious excitement at taking on this new challenge. I think I've done what I've done in foreign affairs. I think I've had some successes, some not so good successes, but I think all in all, I think I've fulfilled my mandate in foreign affairs. But I look forward to agriculture, and I look forward to talking with the diaspora, the same diaspora we just had the conversation with, to see how they can become involved in agriculture, given the fact that it's one of the most important.
This is one thing I'm going to say before I bring back the rest of the panel. And this is a concern that Grenadians in the diaspora have, that when you critique the government, and we've heard this, you know, when you critique the government of Grenada, irrespective of which government it is, you get a pushback. Well, you don't live in Grenada, you're not on the ground in Grenada. Minister David, that perception has to change, because I should be able to critique the government as an independent journalist, right, and still be viewed as performing a patriotic duty.
My view of Grenada, I have lived, as I say all the time, I lived 10 years in the United States, 5 years in London, 5 years in Canada. My view of Grenada is that Grenada is anywhere a Grenadian stands. My view is that the diaspora, and I used the phrase in 2008, 9, 10, I used it again, the diaspora is the 16th constituency. I believe the diaspora has a right. In fact, more than that, they have an obligation to critique, to offer suggestions, to participate, to do what is necessary to help build this country. I did it when I was in the diaspora. I have colleagues and comrades like yourself who do a wonderful job. Kellen, what you're doing here this morning is part of the development process. You are bringing Grenada to the world. So I believe, and I believe it with all the passion that I have, and you know, I bring passion to whatever I do. I believe that the diaspora must be part of it. And if they want to critique, I hope that in critiquing, we also get suggestions moving forward, but they have a right to critique. In fact, somebody in the diaspora has a right to participate in our development process, the same way that I have a right to participate sitting here in St. George's. And that's my view of the diaspora policy. That's my view of the objective of the policy, to create a space that we call Grenada, which includes all Grenadians as far as South Africa, to Germany, to New York, to London, to wherever they are. That's my view of it, and I do hope that we get the embrace of the diaspora in that regard.
Ambassador James, sorry to keep you away from your lunch. So some final wrap-up comments, sir.
Well, first of all, let me just say this. In the discussion about the region being involved, we have taken some steps already to ensure that we get input from the region. In fact, recently, just before COVID, we had a conference in Grenada of diaspora, on the diaspora in Grenada, to talk about different aspects of diaspora development. It was organized by the IOM, and it was a successful discussion in Grenada. And we are also looking forward to having a remittance conference or workshop in the not too distant future to discuss this whole question about remittance and so on. So I want to let people know that we are involved. I know that also because of the COVID has given us new opportunities that we have to embrace. And COVID also has provided us the opportunity to do things differently. And so the diaspora becomes critical in the development of our country in this period. So we have to ensure that we discuss it. And I agree with Tefa, and I agree with the minister that the region, we have to look at the region as being taken approach collectively in this whole diaspora engagement. And finally, I want to say thanks to the minister for his leadership from since 2009 on the diaspora issue. And I look forward to continue working with him, working with the new minister on the diaspora issue. And I'm happy to see Tefa and Trisha, because they have been part of this whole diaspora initiative from day one, from the time we started the initiative in 2009, and they are still here and passionate as ever about the whole diaspora thing. So I also, in closing, I want to encourage all our members of the diaspora to look at the policy and provide us with some feedback on it. Next week, we have a meeting of the diaspora to discuss the policy draft. It will be the final meeting, and I encourage everybody to join us at that meeting. Is a virtual meeting, so that it could be part of the discussion and give the 2 cents that we will say, so we could develop a policy that everybody could say they had a hand, they had a part to play in that whole development.
Tesfa?
Thank you, Kellen. Thank you so much for this discussion, and thank you everybody for being here. My final thought is this: I want to advocate for an indigenous, context-based, research-informed diaspora policy arrangement for Grenada and for the region. I am not going to just say it. I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. I am willing to be a part of the information sharing and the education that will be necessary for our local population to understand the implications of the policy, and for our diaspora members who are resident overseas. So I am happy to do my part. I intend at some point to be actively involved in podcasting or broadcasting in some form around diaspora policy and around diaspora generally, because diaspora, as you know, Kellen and others, does not just have to do with these kinds of policy arrangements that we're talking about. There are broader implications around African diaspora and so on that we can bring into the discussion to encourage a broader understanding of what diaspora can actually do. I am also scheduled in 2021 to give a lecture on behalf of the Institute for People's Enlightenment on diaspora policy. So that is something that I am going to continue to talk about. Like Ambassador James said, diaspora has been my baby from a very young person. He has been one of the people who has encouraged my interest in it, and I am willing, excited, and able to continue to contribute as a scholar to developing this diaspora policy.
Tesfa, thank you so much. For some final wrap up before we leave. This has been another edition of the Bub Report. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and have a great week. Bye-bye.